Okay.
And I actually just got married too. Oops, need to change my
Oh,
name.
yeah. Well, we won't.
No.
Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you.
So, hi, this is Joel Andrin. Welcome to the PressFriendly Podcast. Today we're joined by the Senior PR Manager at Yumly, Shelby Hollister. Hi, Shelby.
Hi, Joel. How are you?
Pretty good. Welcome to the podcast, our wonderful digs here. So before we get into start talking shop with PR, I'd love to hear a little bit about how you got into PR in the first place.
Yeah, so kind of growing up, I was always a fan of, reading and writing, and when I entered college, I knew I wanted to be a journalism major. So at the college that I went to, it's a journalism major, and it splits into news editorial and public relations, which at the time I thought I was just, writing, and I wasn't clear. So, you kind of start learning the basics together, and then you split off into news editorial, public relations, depending on which route you wanted to go. But I thought the really cool thing that kind of turned me on to PR is before we graduated, we had to have like a mandatory internship.
Yep.
So they either, you apply, they placed you somewhere, or you like applied to have to be a part in their student-run PR firm. So it ran exactly like an agency. You had real clients outside in the community and within the school. So naturally, when I graduated, I liked that experience, so I knew I wanted to go towards an agency. So I was connected with an alumni from one of my schools, and then she got me my first job at Atomic, which is now Grayling, and I worked there for 5 years. So I started out entry-level account executive or account coordinator position, and then I worked my way up to account supervisor before I left to join Yumly.
Okay, great. No, that sounds good, and that's how we know each other because we work together when I was at Atomic. So describe what you do on a sort of day-to-day basis at Yumly. What are you responsible for? What do you look to do?
Yeah, so my current role is that I lead all of the communications at Yumly. So anything from strategic planning to media relations, speaking engagements, kind of the whole gamut. I do it all. I'm a one-woman show over here. So it's nice, and I think a lot of my agency background has definitely helped me be able to manage all of those tasks.
Okay, cool. And how is it different from agency life at in-house?
I think, working at an agency is definitely different from working in-house, but I think having both experiences definitely makes you a better PR professional. Agency, you definitely are pulled in different directions and different clients, but it teaches you how to manage relationships really well, and to be able to, kind of handle different angles at once. I remember one time I had to pitch like a food client, a photo client, and a finance client all in one day. So, definitely taking the different angles and being able to understand it and understand various journalists. But yeah, I mean, and with that, I take a lot of experiences and contacts that I had at Atomic, and I'm able to apply them at Yumly. But for in-house, I would say, I love the day-to-day interactions, and I'm very immersed in what's going on in various projects from, their inception, as opposed to an agency where you kind of get the product's been done, they'll go ahead and pitch it or create a strategy around it. Whereas this, I'm able to say, we can't launch this, or I wouldn't recommend launching this product till we have X, Y, and Z in it, because it'll make that much more newsworthy. And I think in-house, kind of on that same vein, it's easier to get decisions made because you're right next to the people who are actually creating it and developing it and making decisions. Since I'm in-house, since I'm the only person on my team, I play a big role in terms of, the communication strategy, the content. I work closely with my marketing and product teams, as well as directly with the founders.
Okay, awesome. So it seems like when you're in-house, you really, part of what you're working on is the company narrative and the company story. How does that process come about, and how has that worked for you at Yumly?
Yeah, so when I came in, they had public relations from prior, and so they had a little of they had the boilerplate, they had, the basic tagline, things like that. But since we are still fairly new, recently launching iPhone and iPad applications. Our message is still evolving. We want to make sure that we're including all of those things in it, So whereas before we started as just a tool, now we're something more. So, it's not just a website, it's not just a tool. Now we're full service with apps and things like that. And, we have APIs and all that stuff. So I think, as our products are evolving, it's ever growing too. And we're kind of changing our narrative with the main goal in mind and what we have and what we are. We're one of the innovating, leading ways for people to search and discover recipes. And, I think it's important that as you're going along, you keep that one key message in, but yes, you can definitely add things into there. Figuring out what makes you different than others is important in the narrative. Using that narrative to, develop strategy, guide you within the directions and goals that you want in your company.
Okay, no, that sounds good. So, I mean, if a startup founder is going and starting to create their narrative, it sounds like they should think not only short term but also longer term and where the company is going.
Exactly, and know that have the main goal, but it can alter from here and there as the company is growing long term. Yes.
Okay, wonderful. So maybe we could talk a little bit more about. You said that you just recently did iPad and iPhone apps. What were some of the stories that you went and you presented in line with this new product offering? What were some of the things to support the narrative?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the cool things that and I think it's something that companies should be thinking about is it's important to get your product right before you go out and just try to get out there just to get ahead of the news. And right now, since we are in the food space, it is pretty, inundated with stuff. So we had to go out with something that, made us different. Why is our iPad different than anything else? And I think it really is, it's our data. Think of Yumly as, kind of Pandora or Netflix. We understand your taste preferences. We use machine learning, all this algorithms and back data that help us better understand the user and understand what they're doing and to give them, the better sense. So we, with the iPad, went out with mobile last is actually one of the interesting narratives that we went out with to let people know that, we got our product right. We had our website out for, a couple years, and now we're just going, out with our iPad and iPhone applications. We started with iPhone in September and then went to iPad. Because we wanted to get it right and then, get it out that way. So I think that was one of the key things that people picked up a lot on. I think they loved, we talked about our design, and then we actually had a new feature that was not on the web, but was in the app, so that made it newsworthy as well, that they were now able to add the recipes to a shopping list and kind of take that on the go with them. And I think that's another key thing too, is that have everything out on the website and now you have it on your phone. Okay,
I like the idea of mobile last. I haven't heard that before. So is that something reporters responded pretty well to?
Yeah, and I think it's it's one of those. I think we went at it as we had an initial iPhone design, and because it wasn't right, we scrapped it and we waited months and months till we could get the right one down. And it was because it was that important. And our consumers and users are that important that we wanted to make sure that they had the best and most tailored and experience that they could have.
Okay, awesome. So it sounds like you had a good announcement and you had news, you had this new product. Mm-hmm. What about the times when you might not necessarily, I know most companies don't release products every week or every month.
Yeah.
So, what do you do to generate coverage and generate interest when you don't necessarily have a product to release?
Yeah, so we kind of look at the plan and see where are the gaps, where do we need something, and when I came in, I thought kind of the most interesting thing about Yumly is our data and how we understand things and how we understand the recipes and how we can look at a recipe that comes from a smaller blog that doesn't I could just write a recipe and post it online, and Yumly is able to take that recipe, understand what's an ingredient, understand all these various things about it, calculate nutrition for me so I know how much sodium is in that dish based on what it has. So I thought that, being able to take that data and to use it for something was something that I was super interested in kind of taking on. So what we started with, and I worked really closely is with my data scientist, is our Healthiest Cities release. We basically we took our data with outside data and created an algorithm that incorporates recipe nutrition, so it's saturated fat, sodium, sugars, all that stuff, various ingredients. Is it vegetables? Does it have whole grains? And then different ways that people prepare their food, fried, steamed, baked, and created this algorithm that allowed us to determine and create a score that allowed us to determine what the healthiest cities were. So we went ahead and looked at the top 25 cities and what people were looking for in those areas. So it was really interesting to see how it ranked, and some were more obvious and some were not. I believe San Francisco and the Bay Area ranked #1. But it's just interesting to break out the data, and we created like a whole graph that was interactive that you could click on. How Seattle ranked by meat compared to St. Louis. Or how San Francisco, if they did fried versus or steamed or something like that, and how it ranked in those various categories. It garnered a lot of press from us because you can get very regional with it. Also, from a national level, you're looking at some of the top cities, across the United States. So a lot of people were really interested in that piece of it. And there's a lot of data out there in terms of obesity rates and things like that a lot of journalists were able to pick up and tie to a lot of our data that kind of went hand in hand with it.
Okay, is that data did you prepare that part of the story for them as well, or did you just focus on
we created the data. The outside data, we had some of it, but mostly it was what journalists pulled from other data sources and the USDA and a lot of the those national healthy things that they had pulled the outside data from, but we knew that it was determining the healthiest cities was something that was interesting to a lot of people and nutritionists and things like that as well.
Okay, no, that sounds...
People love rankings.
Yes, top 10 of meat eaters.
Exactly.
As long as you get a BuzzFeed gift, just...
Exactly.
And the reporters, right?
Yeah.
So, okay, awesome. So, it sounds like you have great plans for, what to do when you have news, what to do when you don't have news. When you come into an organization and you're like, okay, I'm sort of building this communication, this PR function from the ground up, what are the components, that you look for? What, strategy-wise, what do you do to make sure that you have a good PR program at your company? Yeah,
it all kind of starts with your company goals. What do you want to accomplish? Do you want to engage new users? You may want to focus on consumer media or lifestyle media. Do you want to fundraise? Then you might want to focus on a lot of the tech blogs or a lot of the publications that people read. So, or try to obtain speaking engagements too, and that way you get a lot of networking. You look like an expert on the topic. Those types of things. So what we do is generally we kind of work on a quarter-by-quarter basis, but depending on what's working for us right now and what our goals are at the moment, and I think as a small startup, looking at quarters is probably the easiest for us, just because things are changing and deadlines and things are moving around. But I try to lay them out at different times, such as like contributed content, seasonal pitching, to submitting speaking engagements, to actual hard news, and I kind of lay that out, and I spread them out individually so that we kind of have something going on. So say you have a hard news segment, maybe the next couple weeks you're working on a contributed content piece that's talking about how food advertisers can talk to customers better or target customers better. Those types of things. I think it's important to have all those various facets in it to make it a full, well-rounded PR communications plan.
Okay, great. No, that's awesome. And if you're talking to a startup founder and they come to you and they say, what give me the one piece of advice. What's the one thing that I need to know about PR or need to know to do PR well at my company? What advice would you give to them?
I think the main thing, and I think it kind of started to when I very first started and I was just learning more about PR, is to ask yourself, like, why does this matter? Like, what real world problem am I solving? Like, what need is my company serving? How is it different from what else is on the market? So I think asking yourself those questions, why does it matter? What need am I real life need am I solving? Because chances are, if you answer that, someone outside of the company can answer that, and a reporter would be interested. With Yumly, so there's a lot of I would say, and this don't put me on the stat, but about 70% of people have some type of dietary restriction or dislike or something of food. So for Yumly, we see it as personal. Like, this is what you eat every single day. So you should get ingredients and you should get recipes based on what you like. Right now, if you are searching for an appetizer with no peanuts just in Google, you'll find that half of the results probably have peanuts in them. So being able to find, if you hate mustard, then you will never see a mustard recipe again in Yumly. So I think it's taking something that people use every day and need it, and kind of asking that question of, what problem am I solving?
Yeah. Okay, awesome. Well, Shelby, thank you very much for joining us. It's been a pleasure having you here, and thanks for talking to us about startup PR and Yumly.
Happy to do it. Thank you.
Yep, take care.
Bye.